security at the university, and they said, no, he's got a desk, but he's also got a locker. So I was able to get a search warrant to encompass the workplace for his desk and his locker, and lo and behold, in his locker was a hard disk drive. So this is back in early 2000s when, you know, hard disk drives were very common to be stored externally and the like. And from obtaining that warrant, we were to uncover documents relating to offshore bank accounts. They were always of the fear, this criminal fraud group were always of the fear that police were one day going to raid them, and therefore they kept all their evidence for their offshore bank accounts, emails, copies of deeds and everything else that was scanned by the banks and everything, faxes. They stored hard copies of the faxes on the hard drive. They're all on this hard drive in his locker. So on obtaining that, we were able to obtain the false names that they were in, and in relation to the Cook Islands, Nauru and various other tax havens and money laundering havens at the time, and uncover over $2 million worth of assets and everything else, from exotic motor cars here in Australia bought with cash, to properties, to a safe house in a farm in like a forest down near Buchan Caves. That was going to be their total hidey hole to, if everything come unstuck, they were going to hide there. So we're able to uncover that all from looking outside the box, and then going through the central authority, being the Attorney General's Department, and mutual assistance and the Liaison network, to be able to restrain all those funds, identify them, of course, through money laundering technology, and then also then restrain them and apply for forfeiture to then sell them when he was convicted, or when they were convicted overseas, so we could sell them for the United States and the like, because their investigations, we're doing mutual assistance with them and for them. So mutual assistance is, I'm fairly passionate about it. It's a very important area. The AFP Liaison network is very critical for your issue at your scenario, and the police-to-police protocols we'll talk about tonight, as you can see here, and the difference between intelligence and in seeking information from overseas government agencies. Now, before I get into the slides, I need you to make sure that you go through and read these links. So you need to have a look at and click on these. See, extradition fact sheets, for instance, when you click on that, and I'll blow it up a bit so you can see it on your screen. You'll see some excellent links here for provisional arrest requests, extradition, the process, the flowchart for procedure for incoming extradition requests, and New Zealand extradition requests, etc. So these are the things you need to have a look at, because when you're going through solving the homework and or looking at your crime in itself, you are looking at these and seeing that there's plenty of information here to assist you. And we'll go through these in the slides, but I just wanted to highlight that these are all in the links. So the links that I've provided, right, you're going to have a nice flow chart here. And for instance, we'll look at the police-to-police assistance. I'll get this thing out of the way of my screen. So the police-to-police assistance, it says here, is a form of cooperation between the police in one country and police in another. And an example of this is the police's exchange of intelligence information or prelim inquiries to determine whether an evidence of an offence is located in a foreign country. Now, just because we have some suspects that are overseas in our scenario, before we go through the whole cumbersome effort of mutual assistance requests, and that's through the police will be doing that through the Attorney General or through the Director of Public Prosecutions, through the Attorney General's Department, to the Attorney General's Department overseas, who will then go to either the prosecutor overseas or to the police agency to secure the evidence. That is a lot of paperwork and a lot of government hands to go through. So what the AFP have done is they've set up a fantastic overseas network, and there is links on their website in relation to that with a great chart listing all the countries that officers are in. And what they have is what they call police to police. So as you can see here, a murder has happened in Australia. Okay, this is on the sample on your screen now. A murder has happened, and this sums it up beautifully. So the police identified a need for a witness statement for the investigation. So what happens is they will request to say to Los Angeles or whatever, where the witness is, you know, is Joe Blow in your jurisdiction? They will make some inquiries and say, yes, he is. He lives at this particular address. Then the police then, through the AFP Liaison network, who have done a great job in building up relationships with the local police, will seek the US counterparts to obtain that statement voluntarily. Okay, he's only a witness. So the US police go out and they take the statement for the Australian police. Okay, so that is just say, yes, we can get a statement. Now, the prosecution though say, yes, this is great. We're now getting enough evidence here to possibly start a case against this person. We have witnesses overseas, we have suspects overseas. However, we can't use the police to police as it is in the format it's in. We have to be able to adopt it within the courtroom. So that's when mutual assistance comes into play. So you'll go through and put a mutual assistance request in, that's the police, right, with the DPP and with the Attorney General's Department, and they need it in an admissible form. So then the Australian government, that's the Attorney Generals in Canberra, will make a MA, what they call MA, mutual assistance request, to the US for the statement to be in an admissible form. So the US government then provides a witness statement in an admissible form. So therefore it goes to, we just call it the formalities. So the police to police is to say, hey, is suspect A living in your country? That's fine. That's like a phone call. Once that relationship is established, once our liaison officers have fostered those great relationships, have said, yes, I've got enough to go to the police now and ask them that question. You've satisfied me that a crime has taken place. I've got enough now to go and ask the question, is the suspect living at XYZ? And then they'll go to the police, and the police will make some covert inquiries and find out, yes, that person is living there. So therefore, that information will flow back to the Australian police, and then the investigators then will make a decision, well, if he's a suspect, we're going down the mutual assistance format. So just to show you there, go to those links, have a look at these. It explains about agency to agency. The central authority is always the Attorney General's Department, so that's the central authority when you read that. And it just gives you how the information will generally flow initially for mutual assistance. And it is a great system. Don't forget to look at the AFP International Network to see what countries they are working out of. I've been lucky to go over to the Hong Kong Post and to the Washington DC and to the one in Malaysia in KL, and they're excellent posts over there out of the embassies and out of the consulates, and they work hand in hand with local law enforcement. And I tell you, it's fantastic that once you're on a case, that you as an investigator can pick up the phone and talk to your Hong Kong, say, investigator and have a really good conversation about intelligence. So intelligence is not evidence, it's information, excuse me. So
Brad,
make sure you go through these, they're good links.
Sorry, Brad,
Yep.
just a couple of quick questions. Got a question on that flowchart that you're just showing now. Does the admissible form take care of various legal and other differences between the US and Oz? And then a couple of questions about your hard disk example when you had to get a warrant to search a locker. Did you need another warrant to search the hard drive, and what would have happened if the disk was encrypted?
No, good questions. Okay, great questions. In relation to the warrant, no, what happened was we got a warrant in relation to the person and any property within his premises, and then we just did the same for the workplace. So it was only to search, like we couldn't have searched the whole university, it was only to search his desk, and because security were very good to us, they could identify that it might have been, for argument's sake, locker 454 on level 3, and we could only search the locker, which encompassed everything. Now we've got a list in our search warrants. You have to list what you're looking for. Now sometimes you can go outside, or if you can't list everything ad nauseum, and something might be relevant to the offence that you've uncovered and it's not on your list, you can still seize it, right? So what happens is we listed the hard drive without a doubt, because I'd thought a computer would be there, and on that would have been hard drive as well. Back in the day when I first started, we were getting things like typewriter ribbons were listed. Okay, so that shows you how old I am. We went back and listed individually typewriter ribbons, typewriters, typewriter ribbons. Then we went into hard disks, floppy disks, you name it, 3.5-inch disks and everything. So we just listed that we wanted the computer, as well as documents, as well as a hard disk, a floppy disk, because being 1999 or whatever it was, a floppy disk, and the 3.5-inch disc. So we listed those and we could seize that. So we didn't have to have a separate one. If it was encrypted, well, you would have to then ask him to unencrypt it, which most likely he would not. You could not make him, and we'd have to send that off to certain agencies to try and decrypt it. But yeah, so we just list the items.
Okay, so fair to say it was a criminal case then.
Oh, that was definitely a criminal case. It was reverse people smuggling, sending over 2,000 Australians to work illegally in the United States.
Okay.
It was an interesting case. It was different. It had the impact. This is what people don't understand about how cases can impact the country. It had the possibility is that over 2,000 people were illegally overstaying their visas because they were earning double the money then. The dollar was about 64 cents or something, and they were driving trucks. And it got to a stage whereby the US government could have quite easily said to Australia, you've got so many overstaying on your visa, you're now becoming a threat. You're not going to be able to enter America as easily as you can. So that's why these type of cases are very important, and people don't realise that. Same with computer crime and things like that. If there's hackers all through Australia attacking America all the time, it can damage relationships. So that's a good example of that. We had 2,000 overstay visas, and we got to the bottom of it, and it was very document intensive, hence computer storage records and everything on computers. If it wasn't for getting the hard drives, we wouldn't have uncovered the documents stored on the computer. And if we didn't think outside the box and go for his workplace, we wouldn't have got those documents. If we just settled for his house, we would have missed all of that. So it's like in your case now that you've got to get everything to the police, and everything that's relevant and ties in, you need to inform them that. You need to say, look, this girl that's come forward and said that he's storing a laptop or whatever with her. So he's got a propensity, in my opinion, if he's storing a laptop with her, where else is he storing? Has he got a storage facility? Does his phone records from your work phone call a storage facility, one of those, easy store facilities or whatever? These are things you need to provide the police. So if you've got phone records from that, you've got to be able to share as much as you can and let them make the decisions, because those little peripheral things can unlock a whole can of worms. So hopefully that answers that question. And there's one more there about does the admissible form take care of various legal and other differences between Australia and the US? Well, basically, for mutual assistance to kick in, and we'll go through the slide shortly, it's got to be an offence in Australia and the United States. It has to be very similar. So it doesn't have to be totally identical, but they have to be very similar offences for mutual assistance to kick in. So there must be an offence for the crime here and in the United States. And that's the basic requirement there. So it's a great piece of legislation. Okay. So got some more questions.
Yeah, we've got a couple more, Brad, but I'm conscious of time. We'll try and get to them, I think, at the end of the lecture, because I know at least John will get to the blab, and any others we might just ask in the blab.
Yeah, keep those for the blab. There's some good ones there. One's from Peter's very good, and and then the last one as well. So we'll get to that. So so I've really reinforced that you need to go through those links and everything else, and hopefully they will assist you in starting to look at listing what countries that you can request with the AFP to start looking for information with their overseas network. Drill down on their website, on the International Liaison network, and you will see their excellent network that they can go police to police. But again, it's based on the information you give them. You've got a host of information in your scenario. You'd want to have your systems in place and processes in place to make sure that they've got all that in chronological order. Some people have done some fantastic charts. If I was an investigator in computer crime and I went to your office and you provided me, the flow charts, the chronological order, your whole systems and processes on how you preserve the evidence, how you have a chain of custody and everything, it just makes everything so much smoother. And also, I was at a place today where they've got pro forma statements made virtually. So you might have had one of these incidents in the workplace. Think about drawing up a pro forma statement. Your role is, as an IT security manager, is I do this, 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 and this. I've been doing it for so long. I'm qualified in this, 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 and this. And you talk through your qualifications, how long you've been doing it, what your role entails. Get all that background out already pre-prepared for in case one day it does happen, and it's very polished. Have it very polished in your words, really to the point, and then the investigator will come in and walk you through the whole what's taken place. What do you have for me today here, John? Let's put it all on the table, and he'll walk you through step by step, or she'll walk you through step by step. So today, as I said, we're going through all of this material here that we've just covered in a nutshell. We'll look at the Extradition Act as well. Police to police, we've quickly discussed on the mutual assistance. I want you to be able to identify the government departments, which we know now is the central authority. We know that there's mutual assistance legislation, which we'll go through in these slides, the posts that can assist, who can be extradited, and don't forget there's two types of extraditions. There's state extradition and international extradition. Now, state extradition is handled by the Victoria Police or New South Wales Police if it's a state matter, and then you've got your international. So there's two different. The Attorney General's Department, the Commonwealth Attorney General's Department, does not get involved in the state extraditions. So from New South Wales to Tasmania, all right, that is a state matter. So the Australian cybercrime law, right, came into force in the 1st of March of 2013 and establishes the legislative framework for Australia's accession to the Council of Europe Convention on Cybercrime, the Convention. It has the effected by amendments of a number of existing Commonwealth statutes, including the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act. So it's nicknamed the MACMA. It can be referred to as MACMA if you hear that. The Criminal Code Act, the Telecommunications Interception Act, and the Telecommunications Act of 1997. So the purpose of it was that the new cybercrime law is to empower Australia's law enforcement and intelligence agencies to compel carriers to preserve the communication records of persons suspected of cyber-based crimes. Now, we know this is all in the press, and the telcos are screaming that it costs so much money to retain so much data. Who's going to pay for it? And this has been a long-going issue with the telcos. And the law expands the Commonwealth cybercrime offences and facilitates international cooperation between the state parties to the convention through cross-border sharing of communication records. So cross-border sharing of the communication records. The mutual assistance and role of the AGs, as I said, is to facilitate Australia's ability to provide mutual assistance to other state parties. So that is, remember, state party, when we're talking in international terms, are countries, right? Rogue states like North Korea and the like. they're regarded as a rogue state, but state parties are generally Greece, Italy, Germany, all these other countries are referred to as states. It's confusing, I know, but that's how it's referred to in the international arena. And to receive such assistance in return in respect to the investigation and prosecution of offences under the Convention. And this has been effected by increasing the range of law enforcement tools available for Australian agencies to assist foreign investigations and providing them with greater access to information stored overseas in the investigation of cybercrimes. So we're asking for records overseas and they're producing it. And we're doing the same from here for them as well. So Australia needs to ensure that criminals cannot evade prosecution because the evidence or proceeds of their crimes are in different countries. And this really got reinforced back in the 80s and 90s, more so the 90s, with regards to money laundering. We really had all that terrorist financing. We had all the money laundering legislation enacted. We had the OSTRAC, tracking all the proceeds of crime travelling around the world. And mutual assistance really got a good test in that era with money laundering activity and terrorist financing. Now with cybercrime being transnational as it is really getting tested to expand and capture as much information sharing between agencies or states, as we call it. So therefore, remember, the police to police as much as we can, and then through the paperwork and getting the evidence, all right? And also to recover the proceeds of crime. If we didn't have mutual assistance, we would never have restrained over $2 million in my American case worth of assets. So the applicable legislation, right, the AG's department is responsible for seeking and providing governments, as I said, to government assistance in criminal matters, and the mutual assistance system is governed by the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act, and there it is there. So MACMA. And mutual assistance requests are made by the Attorney General, as I said, and the Minister for Justice on behalf of a law enforcement agency, a prosecuting agency, and a defendant in a criminal matter in some cases. Now, I'll discuss that in the blab. So have a think, how can a defendant in a criminal matter would need information from overseas? So have a think, and someone might want to raise that in the blab and discuss it there, but we'll go through that. So Guy, if we can make a note of that, and we'll discuss that one in the blab. So a defendant in a criminal matter, right, making a request.
Absolutely.
Okay, it's a reciprocal process. We need to drive that home, and we do, right? That goes both ways. We can make requests to any foreign country, and we can receive requests from any foreign country. Now remember, they're only requests, okay? So they can get bogged down. You might say, oh, a country, can't deny to help. But if we haven't been playing the game, or they haven't been playing the game, I could imagine, and I'm talking hypothetical here, that paperwork could get buried for a long time. I know with one particular country in an investigation, it took 12 months to get a bank statement back. So things can get buried, but it is generally, we work extremely hard, say in this country, providing assistance where we can, and we expect the same in return. Countries assist on the understanding that they will receive assistance when the need when it arises. So we always hope that we're going to get that help when the need arises. So there's alternatives, right? And that is what we said before, to mutual assistance and to obtain information and evidence from foreign countries. More so on the intelligence side. Okay, so police to police assistance is a form of cooperation between the police, as I said, in one country and police in another. Now this is on the Attorney General's website, so I'm not giving out trade secrets of how the police operate. I've used police to police on dozens of occasions. It is fantastic, and it's only because the AFP have got a great international network. You would have to have probably one of the best in the world, and I'd say Canadian Mounties would be second. FBI on television looks great, are great, but they tend to go in pretty heavy, and we tend to foster relationships in a very diplomatic manner and just do the softly, and a nice handshake, and information can flow. All legal, and it's all on like a gentleman's agreement in a sense, just for the information, the basics. Then you then can say, okay, I need to get a warrant. Now, if we need evidence per se, we'll go and get a warrant, and the mutual assistance request goes in. So examples of police to police, again, exchange of intelligence information or prelim inquiries, as I said before, to make sure that the offence or the offender is in that country, okay, or an offence has taken place. You don't want to go through all that paperwork and weeks of affidavits and going through Attorney General's department and prosecutors' offices when he's not even or she's not even in the country. Okay, we discover we're looking in New Zealand and they're in Fiji. Okay, agency to agency assistance is a form of cooperation between non-police agencies and their counterparts overseas. They can have that as well. And Australian federal investigative agencies have information sharing arrangements with their counterparts. So that'd be like immigration, border protection, customs. They too can do agency to agency and does not require mutual assistance. Remember, intelligence only, or don't ever get confused with that. So police to police and other agency to agency assistance can be an effective way to determine what material is held, as I said before, prior to putting the request in. So make sure you get that underway, or the police would get that underway prior to putting a request in. I said there it's on their website, as it says here on the screen. And evidence versus intelligence. We know that police information intelligence can be heavily constrained by legislation that governs the type of information police may hold and for which it may be held and how it should be handled. So we've got to be very careful there, right? There's a lot of secrecy provisions and things like that. For instance, Hong Kong police couldn't ring up an investigator here and say, hey, listen, can you go down to the ANZ Bank and tell me how much money has our target got in the ANZ Bank in Melbourne? It just couldn't happen. The bank would say, we can't help you, okay? So you have to be still mindful that there is a lot of privacy legislation and a lot of legislation that's applicable, right? But there is some intelligence that's held on the police databases that they can share with each other.
Sorry, Brad, just on those sort of those legislative, I suppose, hindrances. I've got a few questions here. What happens when an extradition, a country that's trying to expedite imposes its own conditions to the country it's requesting of? Got a question about what options there are, or what about countries with no extradition laws, such as Spain and Christopher's case and these sorts of things, and who determines what a rogue nation is, or how a rogue nation, or how is a rogue nation determined?
Well, that's a good question. There is protocols and there is treaties and the like that are in place. Like, for instance, only a few years ago that we could extradite with Vietnam. So then they've signed some conventions and treaties that would allow us to do that. So there is a list of countries that do participate in either information sharing or mutual assistance requests. And if they're signatory to those treaties, that's how that takes place. Look, Greece was always one. I'll just get a sip of cordial here for a second. Greece was always one that everyone used to say, oh, look, you can hide in Greece and we don't have extradition with them. And then if you look at the Mockbell case, he was hiding in Greece, I think possibly, and I'm not quoting anything here, I'm just surmising from what I'm reading in the paper. I think he was hiding in Greece because he thought we had no extradition treaty in place. And sure enough, he's been extradited from Greece. So just because they might not be signing to a treaty, they might work around it in some other ways. And I might pay to look at that Mockbell case to see how did that come about. Because I think it comes from government putting pressure on countries and saying, look, we've got this person, and we won't get into the barley nine because we haven't got time, but I always went through the AFP knowing full well that we could not deal information with countries if they had the death penalty. So, you know, there's a lot of arguments around that. We're not going to get into that, but here we are, information is flown to Indonesia and they have the death penalty. So, but then there's other protocols that the AFP have introduced now in relation to that. So again, it's just a matter of researching it a bit in the area you're looking at and seeing what's applicable at the time. All right. So evidence that proves or disproves an allegation is subject to a host of rules, absolutely. And we've got to look at that evidence to say, okay, can that be revealed to another country, or do they have to get a warrant? All right. So do they have to get a warrant? And a good example is that bank case. If we say that XYZ has a bank account possibly at an ANZ, they would then have to try and get a mutual assistance request through for us to execute a warrant on the ANZ Bank to get that material. And we've got some quick examples here. We'll wrap up with a few more slides. Intelligence is human intelligence, as it's called, information from informants and observations. You know, Mary Ray is a form of human intelligence, although she's a witness. She might decide to turn informant and snitch on him. She might know a lot more about what's taking place. It looks like she does on the information that you've got. So you'd want to kind of look at what do we do here. But then again, she could be involved as well. So you've got to be careful. There's information to suggest she might have offshore bank accounts coming in. So you don't want to go too early and make her an informant when really you should be cautioning her. This is the investigator's role, not yours, but collecting the information, right? You have to be careful. Is she informant, or is she a co-offender, or which way do we go, or just a witness? So again, that's for the investigator to do, but that's why you've got to look at all the relevant information. We've got information in your scenario that she possibly has asked or conducted searches on her desktop with regards to offshore bank accounts. So we've got signals intelligence, we've got communications intelligence, and we've got strict rules on how it can be collected and used. If you go through the Kim.com case, you'll see it's fairly lengthy, great to read when you get a chance. The New Zealand Prime Minister apologised because they used their spy agency to, I think, spy on him at one particular time when they really weren't allowed to, because they had to be a foreign national, and I believe he had residency or something from memory. So that's like their signals intelligence, right? So therefore it might be from satellites and that. Again, strict rules on how it can be used. We used to have what was called the Defence Signals Directorate. It's changed its name recently. They can only spy on external communication and via satellites and the like. They can't spy on your telephone calls made here in Australia. So again, the bottom line there says strict rules on how it's collected and used. Open source, we've quickly discussed that. Newspapers, radio, television. I had to advise some agencies today in relation to the Facebook buy, swap and sell pages. They're absolutely rampant with stolen goods on the Facebook buy, swap and sell sites. Not really related, I haven't seen much related to IT issues, but when it comes to moving stolen goods, the Facebook buy, swap and sell sites are fairly full of material. So again, open source is excellent. Extradition, we need that. The criminals cannot evade justice, so we have got this in place. Extradition is a process, as we know, for apprehends and sends a person to another country for the purposes of criminal prosecution or to serve a prison sentence, and it's governed by the Extradition Act. So have a look at that when you get a chance, the Extradition Act of 1988, and that's what governs our extradition. AGs is the central authority, as I said, in relation to that, and state ones are by the Service and Execution of Process Act. I was fortunate to extradite half a dozen people to Little Rock, Arkansas through with the US Marshals on my case. A fantastic experience in the sense of learning how that the prisoner, so if you've got a prisoner here that's been extradited to America for an offence, so if he's hacked some companies or the likes in the United States and they want to extradite him or her there. It is a fascinating process to go through all this paperwork, but to see how when the US Marshals come to take the prisoners back, that they are in our custody until the immigration line. So once they get to that customs line there and you get to customs and you go through that, they then become the prisoner of the United States. So then they take them into another room and search them thoroughly, and then board them on the aeroplane. But it's just to see that whole process whereby they're in your care and control as an Australian police officer until you go through that immigration line there in customs, and then they are, and the Americans don't muck around in extraditing, even fraudsters. They will shackle them 9 times out of 10 for officer safety, and put them on the back of the plane, even though it's a fraud. International extradition, Australia's extradition relationships.
Sorry, Brad, just a quick question on that one. Are tools like Maltego admissible in court? Seems like Maltego is a software used for open source intelligence and forensics.
Whoa.
Just,
is it admissible?
Yeah, admissible in court.
Well, I honestly, because all these things change, you'd have to look at the reliability of that software, and how that data is extracted, and if they can present, if the prosecutor can present a strong case that it's reliable, I can't see no reason why it's not. It's up to the defence to say that it's unreliable or it's unstable to do that.
And I
so
suppose
it comes down to the best argument. Yep.
And I suppose that's the case for all foreign evidence. We've just got a couple of questions about validating foreign evidence. You know, if it appears pertinent, reliable, and is within the guidelines and restrictions imposed, then it should be admissible or up for argument.
Absolutely, it's got to pass. It's got to pass the test in the courts, right? That it is evidence that can be admissible, right? Back to, remember we said about relevance, and we haven't got relevance and Evidence Act and everything else is all a subject within themselves. So, you know, it's got to be relevant and it's got to be admissible, and it must be admissible in the jurisdiction that it's being retrieved from. So if the evidence is overseas and it can be admitted in their court for the crime, that's a very similar crime. Remember how the crimes have to be similar? So if it can be admitted there, we can have it admitted. So yeah, it has to pass the test in the jurisdiction that it's in. We can't say we've got a certain way of getting evidence that really is a bit questionable, which is, you know, doubtful, because very much common law countries are very similar. We have to make sure that, you know, it's gathered in a professional manner that's admissible in the court of law for that jurisdiction. All right. So again, we partner with these countries, right, to prevent Australia from becoming a refuge and safe haven for persons. You could just imagine, like Mallorca was with Christopher Skase, if all these people decided to go to these places, everyone would be living in these locations and saying, well, we're not coming back to Australia. So they committed a serious offence here and then go to the likes of these type of countries. And we've gone through this earlier in the class, so we won't go through that top paragraph. And also down the bottom here, the Extradition Act sets out a number of requirements that must be met before Australia can make or accept the extradition request. Those requirements may be supplemented by requirements contained in a multilateral or bilateral treaty. So we go back to those treaties that you asked before about, right? We have a list of these requirements in these treaties. And as I said, Vietnam only recently allowed us to do that. We're getting close to the end on these now. If a matter is urgent, for example, when it's believed that a fugitive may flee the jurisdiction, a country can seek the provisional arrest of the fugitive through Interpol channels or directly between the central authorities of the relevant countries. Someone asked about Interpol last week. They can get involved under the provisional. Now, on those links to the website, it's got those fact sheets. This is where it'd be good for you to know. It'd be good for you to know in the workplace. You know, you've got a serious IT issue. you know the suspect might be fleeing or something like that, you can advise them. So when you're doing your reports to law enforcement, you can say, look, you've got all these opportunities. You can seek an urgent provisional arrest request and through Interpol channels. So to know that in the early days of your attack at your workplace, to be able to brief management to say, look, if we can put enough evidence to the police to get them involved, or the forensic investigators to get them involved, to then go to the police with a package of all the evidence, and you start talking mutual assistance, you start talking urgent provisional arrest requests, you know, you hopefully going to get some action, and they will take note. New Zealand and Australia are governed by a separate and distinct regime known as the backing of warrant system. Again, we won't go into that, but it's on those great links that I've put up there. So please go through those in your own time. Click on the New Zealand system and you'll get some fact sheets about that. And it's also administered by police forces and prosecuting authorities in Australia and New Zealand. So without sounding too simplified, it's probably fairly simple to New South Wales extraditing from Victoria. Okay, I mean, New Zealand and Australia are close allies, and we've made things seamless for working and travelling. It's the same with extradition. So remember, there's a difference between extradition and deportation, right? So don't get confused there. Extradition is a formal government-to-government process by which foreign country sends a person to another country to face prosecution or to serve a sentence. Extradition is only requested for serious criminal offences, and deportation is the removal of a person who does not have any lawful right to enter or stay. So an overstay on their visa, things like that, will be a deportation. So keep that simple. An overstay or something on a visa would be a deportation, and extradition is in relation to a crime, and we've covered that before. Homework, we'll quickly go through this. How would you present to the AFP the alleged criminal activity, and what information would you provide? So you'd want to start looking at how you package that up of what you've got. And we've mentioned that last week about, and you're starting to do it in the week 2, is you're starting to say, well, this is how we collect the evidence, right? We are now getting into week 4 next week, where we're going to look at packaging it all up. So you're chronologically gathering all the information, you're looking at overseas information that you need to be able to say to the AFP, we believe there's some suspects in London or in Hong Kong. We believe that there could be information that overseas bank accounts in these locations, and this is where the information is held, and we've collected it for you. Look at the process in seeking mutual assistance from countries. Just do dot point forms if you like in your answers. Those fact sheets will help you immensely with that. Number 3. Number 2, it's the website is what AFP liaison officers will assist you. So that's very straightforward, especially the countries that are involved in this scenario. What's the police-to-police process? Again, we went through that, and it's very straightforward again. So intelligence, police-to-police, mutual assistance for evidence. Which suspects, if charged and found guilty, would face extradition to Australia? Limited information on that so far, but you could get some idea there. Do you believe the AFP can go directly to international law enforcement agencies with a police-to-police request? If so, why? And, you know, you can list that out in dot point form and post your analysis in the forums. So based on what you've gone through tonight with mutual assistance, the information that's going to flow into the scenario over the next 24, 36 hours, you'll start to see it's all coming together, and then next week we package it all up and how it would be presented to the DPP. Not formally we're going to go to that, all that work, it's too much work, but in dot point form, what we would do, and just to give you a hint, a summary of facts is normally the first port of call, so you would list out a summary of the whole incident. Now you don't have to do that in your homework, but I'm just saying when you look at the DPP manual, that is why I get you to how you've been putting this together over the weeks. It's so the police can come in and sit you down and go, right, what has happened here? And they can do a nice summary of facts for the prosecutor. They look at the evidence that they've got from you, they look at the evidence that they can collect, they analyse everything, do a nice summary for the prosecutor, and then back it up with what we call a brief of evidence, and that is all the evidence with statements attached, exhibits attached, overseas inquiries and evidence from overseas, and records from overseas and everything else, and that's how you get your brief next week when we get to the final week. So on that, there's your homework. Pretty straightforward in dot point form. Don't have to be too cumbersome. You only have to comment to other students if you're too overwhelmed with everything. Some people are doing a really fantastic job, and if you think, geez, I've already done that in my group, just say, very good post there, Mary or Jane. That's excellent how you've covered this. You've ticked the box for the homework to get your certificate at the end for passing the exam at the end, which will be multiple choice and true false online. And we'll talk about that next week. But basically, just answer each week. You don't have to go into full detail. Just participate in your group, make a couple of discussion posts, and everybody's happy. So we're going to be having the blab at just on after 10 past. So if you want to jump over to the blab and think about, we're going to talk about tonight, and people jump into the room and you tell me best practice. How do I can't keep up. How do we keep up with, how do you keep up in the workplace with all this information that's flowing in? It's mind-boggling. Alrighty, and Guy, if you'd like to
Yeah, sure.
wrap up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a few questions related to Interpol and extradition. We've got a few questions from Bridget. We've sort of spoken about the list of partner countries constantly being updated. I suppose that's available at the AG's website or the Federal Police website?
Oh, actually, that's a good point, but I wouldn't mind having that up on the system, so I'm going to look for that. So the treaties, yeah, the list of the countries that have signed the treaties, and that would be very good to have as a reference point, so I'll try and put that up on the discussion forum.
Yeah.
Drill down on AGs, but drill down on AGs. It's a great site. It's a fantastic site.
And a couple of related questions about how we I suppose measure information coming from foreign intelligence. As Richard's spoken about, some countries containing a bias or just some countries just having incorrect information.
From my observations from having worked in Fiji, so Asia, Pacific Islands, so different kind of countries in a sense, right? And over to Hong Kong and as I said, KL and the US. It's all on reliability, and I think it's our people on the ground at Foreign Affairs and the AFP who do such a really good job. They kind of give you the heads up of what the reliability of the information is. You have obviously frank discussions with these people and you ask those questions, is this reliable? And you, again, like any intelligence, you rate it, is it A1, which is, totally reliable and been established that it's most likely occurred, or is it F6, totally unreliable and not tested? So again, it's again the relationships that are built that feed you the information to say that this is good information.
All right.
The bias is always hard to get around because obviously with some communist countries and the like, you've got to be fairly, careful on how you diplomatically handle things.
Yep. Yeah. Just a question from John. Was earmarking for the end of the live lecture as well. In the case of cybercrime in the workplace, when it comes to making an arrest, must it be done by a police officer? He speaks of citizens' arrests, and he knows how, for example, private pilots have arrest powers. Can others make arrests in a workplace?
Oh, I would never, even though you have citizens' arrest and there's powers under the Crimes Act and the like to do that, I would never ever do that. You're leaving a can of worms totally open. It's preserving the evidence is the best thing to do and getting the professionals in. There's so many there's so many things open now for investigators. As long as you preserve the evidence, you know, I wouldn't be going down that path. And yeah, any citizen can arrest for an indictable offence, but you'd want to really be on the money, and again, it's got to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So I wouldn't even think about going down that path. I just best to be the professional witness. I always used to say to people, don't get involved, be the professional witness. Time, date, place, identity, jurisdiction. Make those notes as soon as you see it happen. If you can videotape it or whatever, but don't play Mr. Policeman or police person. Let them do it.
Yeah, the follow-up question from John, if they were about to run off, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, and that would be that's a good question. I still would what happens if you're wrong? You're going to get sued. Your workplace is going to get sued. He could be dangerous. She could be dangerous. They could have accomplices outside. It could be part of a bigger spy ring. You know, I'm talking fanciful stuff here, but you never know, right? They could have been an industrial espionage. They could be a spy from another country. You don't want to risk your safety. I would just be the professional witness and gather everything for the relevant authorities. As much as it hurts, yeah, you just have to.
All right. Well, there's a couple of other questions that I'll carry across to the blab later on. Just another.
Oh, that'd be good. If you can do that, I'll go log into all that now, and I'll see you over there in about just under 8 minutes.
Yep, just before you go, just thanks everyone for coming in. If you do have any questions, feel free to jump across to the blab or just email in to the IT Masters through the IT Masters Learn website. Other than that, yeah, jump across to the blab. You'll need a Twitter, of course, and you'll need to use Google Chrome. Yeah,
and
good
the
point,
discussion
Brad.
forums also good to throw in. The regular discussion forums, great questions popping in there, and people are really getting some threads happening within themselves, and I love seeing that. And I do go and check them out, and I do read them, and I do contribute to some where I can. So the discussion forum's great too.
Great. All right, Brad, and thanks for another really interesting lecture. I really enjoyed that one. Thanks everyone for logging in. Hope to see you next week, and hope to see a few of you across at the blab as well.
Did you record this guy?
I sure did.
Oh, thank God. I just
so yeah, as always,
Thanks,
the recordings will be available on the IT Masters website, so it's not a massive problem if you do miss one. You can also complete all of the questions, homework, exams after the four lectures are done. So any questions, let us know. Otherwise, we'll see you next week or in the blab. Thanks very much, folks.